Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to look at just one day, November 19th, 2025, to really understand the massive kind of contradictory forces that are shaping our world right now.
So this is the central question, right? How can a market be totally gripped by fear and, at the exact same time, absolute euphoria? It just doesn't seem to make sense.
All right, to really get a feel for this, let's start with the opening bell. Kind of take a trip around the world. And honestly, the mood was not great. So the day kicks off, and it is just a sea of red across Asia. We're talking Japan's Nikkei, South Korea's Kospi, Hong Kong's Hang Seng. They were all down. And what was the culprit? Well, it was tech stocks. You had this growing nervousness, this feeling that maybe, just maybe, the whole AI boom had gone a little too far, a little too fast. And look, this wasn't just something happening overseas. This anxiety was a direct import from Wall Street. You had the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ already in the middle of their worst losing streaks in months. The bottom line is, fear was in the air. You could almost feel it. Okay, so you've got all this fear, right? Everyone's talking about a potential AI bubble. So you think any company that decides to double down, to go all in on AI, they'd get totally hammered by investors, right? Well, this is where the story gets really interesting. This is the heart of the contradiction. Yeah, this is the moment where the entire narrative for the day just gets flipped completely on its head. Because while the rest of the tech world was basically in a panic, Alphabet, Google's parent company, their stock jumps 3%, a pretty big move. So what on earth was going on? Well, this is what was going on. They announced Gemini 3. This is their newest, biggest, most powerful AI model. So instead of running away from the AI fire, investors ran straight towards it. And it wasn't just investors. The analysts' reaction was, wow. They were completely blown away. They're calling it a major leap forward, the current state of the art. And this really gets to the core paradox of the day, doesn't it? The market as a whole is terrified of an AI bubble, but it would absolutely shower a single company with cash if it thinks they have the next big thing. So you've got this split personality in the market. And that forces every single investor out there to make a choice. What do you do when the signals are this mixed up, this confusing? Well, it basically boils down to two camps. You've got the worriers. They see the fear and they run for the hills looking for safety. And then you have the opportunists. They see that exact same fear and they think, maybe there's a bargain here. And this right here, this is a perfect illustration of that worrier camp in action. On the very same day Google was surging, what happens? Gold prices jump over 1%. You actually saw big-name investors like Joe Terranova selling off their tech stocks, even Apple, to pile into a gold ETF. They were literally trading what they saw as risk for what they saw as safety. And then you've got the other side of the coin. You have people like Jim Cramer basically saying, hey, a market like this is exactly the time you should be looking for those great companies that are just getting unfairly sold off. It's that classic buy the dip strategy. So what's really important to understand is that this tension, this wild mix of fear and excitement, it isn't just about the day-to-day blips on a stock chart. No, this is the backdrop for huge, fundamental shifts that are happening just beneath the surface of the entire economy. I mean, for starters, just look at the political landscape. On this very day, you have President Trump publicly threatening to fire the chairman of the Federal Reserve over interest rates. I mean, that kind of statement throws a huge layer of uncertainty onto everything, right? It just fuels that exact fear that pushes some investors towards those safe assets we were just talking about. All right, now let's pivot and look at the world of finance itself, because some big new players are making their move. So at the same time, in the world of finance, you have what were once fringe assets starting to go totally mainstream. The crypto exchange Kraken, they filed to go public. That's a huge step towards legitimacy. And this really represents that euphoria side of the coin, right? You've got investors betting big on these disruptive new technologies, even while the rest of the market is kind of freaking out. And it's not just finance. The way we all consume media, especially live sports, is also being completely torn up and remade right before our eyes. Just look at this. Major League Baseball announces this massive new media deal. And it shows the exact same dynamic we've been talking about. You've got a legacy broadcaster, NBC, a tech giant, Netflix, and a cable mainstay, ESPN, all carving up the pie. It's wild. It just goes to show that even these huge established industries are being completely reshuffled as old money and new money compete, and sometimes even collaborate.
And it's all driven by that same tension. Do you hold on to what's safe, or do you bet on what's next?
So, after looking at all this from just one single day, what's the big takeaway? Where does that leave us? Well, I think it tells us that the future, it's not some straight line we can easily predict. We're living through a messy, contradictory, and honestly, a pretty fascinating period of change. It's a time where deep-seated fear and absolutely groundbreaking innovation can surge at the exact same moment. And understanding that paradox, that's the key. That's how we make sense of the headlines tomorrow and the day after that.